The air crackled with tension as Officer Brett Hamilton yanked the petite black woman out of her car, his grip bruising her wrist. Her badge, FBI issued and unmistakable, lay on the pavement ignored. She didn't resist, her sharp, dark eyes fixed on his face, blazing with fury but saying nothing. "You think you can flash a fake badge and get away with it?" Brett snarled, slamming her against the hood of her car. "I don't care who you pretend to be." A small crowd gathered, murmurs rising as they watched the officer humiliate the woman in plain sight. "Sir, please," the woman said, her voice calm but firm. "You're making a huge mistake." "Oh, I'll decide who's making a mistake," Brett snapped, snapping cuffs around her wrists. "You people always think you're above the law." The murmurs grew louder. People pulled out their phones, recording. Still Brett pressed on, oblivious to the ripple of unease spreading through the onlookers. Then a voice rang out. "Officer, stop. That's Special Agent Tasha Mills, FBI." Brett froze, his smug smirk vanishing. He glanced at the man in the dark suit, holding up an ID. "FBI, real FBI." "What?" Brett whispered, his face turning ashen. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the handcuffs, trying to undo them. But it was too late. Tasha straightened her shoulders, rubbing her wrists. She picked up her badge from the ground, dusting it off. The crowd stared, silent now. Brett swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. Agent Mills leaned in close, her voice low but cutting like a blade. "You're going to regret this, Officer Hamilton, every single second of it." She didn't wait for a response. Turning on her heel, she walked away, leaving Brett standing there, his mouth dry, sweat beading on his forehead. Earlier that morning, Tasha had woken up to her usual routine. Coffee, morning run, quick scan of the day's agenda. It was going to be a long one, packed with high-stakes briefings and a field operation later in the afternoon. She thrived on this kind of schedule, her meticulous nature keeping her ahead of the game. Driving through her old neighborhood always gave her mixed feelings. She'd grown up here, in a part of town where black kids learned early that respectability couldn't always shield them from prejudice. Becoming an FBI agent had been her way of proving to herself and the world that she could rise above it. As she pulled up to a small cafe for a quick breakfast, she noticed Brett sitting in his patrol car. He looked her way, his eyes narrowing. Tasha didn't think much of it at first. Officers on a slow morning often scanned faces, a routine part of their job. She went inside, ordered a bagel, and returned to her car. But as she slid into the driver's seat, flashing lights lit up her rearview mirror. Brett had pulled her over. "Ma'am, license and registration," he said as he approached her window. Tasha complied without hesitation, handing over her documents along with her FBI badge. "Officer, I'm Special Agent Tasha Mills. Is there a problem?" Brett barely glanced at the badge. "License and registration," he repeated, his tone colder. Tasha frowned but stayed calm. "I just gave you everything you need." "You're impersonating an officer of the law," Brett said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Step out of the vehicle." Tasha's heart rate quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. "Officer, you're mistaken. That's a federal badge." Brett leaned closer, his face inches from hers. "Out of that car." Tasha sighed and stepped out, holding her hands up slightly. Brett grabbed her arm, yanking her to the side of the car. His grip was unnecessarily tight, and the move was clearly intended to assert dominance. The scene unfolded quickly after that. Tasha's protests were ignored, her badge dismissed as a fake, and Brett's actions grew more aggressive. The humiliation she endured reminded her of the stories her father used to tell, about the subtle and overt ways black people were often degraded under the guise of law enforcement. As the crowd gathered and people recorded, Tasha knew this moment would be seen by millions. But her focus remained on keeping her composure. Losing her temper wouldn't help. Besides, she had a gut feeling this would be over soon, one way or another. And that happened. Her colleague's voice pierced through the chaos, bringing Brett's world crashing down. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Brett found himself at the center of a media storm. The videos went viral within hours, sparking outrage and calls for justice. Internal Affairs launched an immediate investigation, and Brett was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. But Tasha wasn't done. She had no intention of letting Brett's actions go unanswered. As the days unfolded, Brett would learn the true cost of his arrogance and prejudice. The wheels of karma were just beginning to turn. The public outcry was deafening. Within hours, news outlets picked up the viral videos, plastering Brett Hamilton's face across every screen in the country. His smug smirk during the arrest contrasted sharply with the panicked, sweaty man trying to backtrack, once he realized who Tasha Mills was. The headlines pulled no punches. Racist cop arrests FBI agent, justice system exposed, and officer faces backlash for targeting black FBI agent. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag justice for Tasha and hashtag accountability now trended nationwide. Brett sat in his dimly lit living room, scrolling through his phone with a sinking feeling. Comment after comment ripped into him. This man shouldn't have a badge. Fire him now. How many people like Tasha has he harassed before? He humiliated a federal agent. Imagine what he does to regular folks. His phone buzzed incessantly. Calls from his superiors, union reps, even his wife, Angela. He ignored them all, staring blankly at the screen as his career unraveled in real time. Then, a knock at the door jolted him. It was Angela, her face pale, her eyes brimming with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Brett, what the hell is going on? I can't even walk into the grocery store without people glaring at me. What did you do?" He opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. How could he explain that he let his bias lead him into the biggest mistake of his life? Meanwhile, Tasha sat in her office, calm but focused. She scrolled through emails, messages of support pouring in from friends, colleagues, and strangers who saw her as a symbol of resilience. But Tasha wasn't celebrating. For every supportive message, there was also vitriol. "She's just playing the race card," some trolls wrote. Another case of a cop doing his job and getting crucified for it. The truth was, Tasha had no intention of being a victim. She worked too hard to let one man's ignorance define her career. But this wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been treated unfairly, humiliated, or dismissed simply because of the color of their skin. As she closed her laptop, her phone buzzed. It was her supervisor, Special Agent Martin Green. "Tasha, we've got a meeting with Internal Affairs tomorrow morning. They want a full debrief." "Understood," Tasha said, her voice steady. "Anything else?" There was a pause on the other end. "Yeah, Brett Hamilton's been placed on leave, but the pressure is mounting for his immediate dismissal. This isn't going to go away quietly." Tasha nodded. It shouldn't. The next morning, Brett walked into the precinct under a cloud of silence. His colleagues avoided his gaze, some whispering as he passed. He went straight to the captain's office, where a grim-faced Captain Ramirez awaited him. "Sit," Ramirez said, his tone devoid of the usual warmth. Brett complied, his hands clammy. Ramirez wasted no time. "You've put this entire department under a microscope. The mayor's office is demanding answers, the media's camping outside, and half the city thinks we're a bunch of racist thugs. What were you thinking?" I didn't know she was FBI," Brett stammered. "That's your defense?" Ramirez shot back, his voice rising. "You humiliated a black woman, dismissed her credentials, and escalated the situation for no reason. And now your surprise is blowing up in your face." Brett shrank in his seat, knowing any excuse would only dig him deeper. Ramirez leaned in, his eyes cold. "Internal Affairs is coming down hard. You'd better have a damn good explanation." At the Internal Affairs hearing, Brett faced a panel of stern-faced investigators. Tasha was there too, seated across from him, her expression unreadable. As Brett stumbled through his version of events, the panel members exchanged skeptical glances. Tasha listened quietly, her mind replaying every second of the encounter. When it was her turn to speak, she laid out the facts with precision, her voice measured but firm. She didn't embellish or seek pity. She didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. "Officer Hamilton ignored my badge, escalated the situation unnecessarily, and treated me with blatant disrespect," Tasha concluded. "This wasn't just about me. It's about the pattern of behavior that allows officers like him to operate without accountability." The panel thanked her, and the hearing concluded. But the tension in the room lingered. Brett avoided Tasha's gaze as they left, his mind racing with fear and regret. As the days passed, Brett's life spiraled further. Angela moved out, taking their kids with her. His bank account dwindled as legal fees piled up. The union's support wavered under public pressure, and even his closest friends distanced themselves. But karma wasn't done with Brett yet. One night, as he sat alone in his apartment, there was a knock at the door. Expecting another reporter or angry neighbor, he hesitated. But when he opened it, he found himself face to face with a man in a sharp suit and a chillingly familiar badge, FBI. "We need to talk," the agent said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Brett's heart sank. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. Tasha's life, meanwhile, took a different turn. Her professionalism and grace during the ordeal earned her widespread respect. She was invited to speak at forums, advocating for police reform and sharing her experiences as a black woman in law enforcement. But Tasha remained cautious. She knew that real change wouldn't come from speeches alone. It required action, accountability, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. As she prepared for her next engagement, a call came through. It was Martin Green. "Tasha, you're going to want to hear this. Internal Affairs uncovered something big on Hamilton. It's worse than we thought." Tasha's eyes narrowed. "How bad?" "Let's just say he's been hiding more than a few skeletons. We'll discuss it in the morning." Tasha hummed up, her mind racing. Whatever secrets Brett had been keeping, they were about to come to light. And she was ready. Brett Hamilton sat stiffly in the dim light of his living room as the FBI agent loomed over him. The man's expression was unreadable, but his presence was suffocating. Brett's palms were clammy, his breath shallow. "Officer Hamilton," the agent began, his voice calm yet unnervingly firm, "we've been reviewing your service record. There are irregularities." Brett's stomach churned. "I don't know what you're talking about." The agent placed a folder on the coffee table, flipping it open to reveal a series of reports. "You've been involved in several questionable incidents over the years. Excessive force complaints, racial profiling allegations, and now this incident with Special Agent Mills." Brett shifted uncomfortably. None of those complaints stuck. The agent raised an eyebrow. "That's because your department buried them. But this time, you went too far. You didn't just humiliate a federal agent. You exposed a pattern of misconduct that can't be ignored." Brett's mouth went dry. "What do you want from me?" The agent leaned in. "You've got two choices. We can continue this investigation and let the chips fall where they may. Or you can cooperate and help us uncover corruption within your department. Either way, you're going down. The question is, how hard?" The next morning, Tasha Mills arrived at the FBI headquarters, her mind sharp and focused. Martin Green was waiting for her in the conference room, a grim expression on his face. "Morning, Agent Mills," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "We made significant progress on the Hamilton case. Internal Affairs found evidence that ties him to a larger network of corrupt officers." Tasha nodded, her jaw tightening. "What kind of corruption are we talking about?" Green pulled up a series of documents on the screen. Bribes, falsified reports, and covering up misconduct. But there's more. "We suspect Hamilton and others have been targeting specific communities, particularly low-income black neighborhoods, under the guise of routine policing." Tasha's eyes narrowed. "What's their goal?" "Control," Green said. "They're using their authority to intimidate and exploit vulnerable populations. And we believe Hamilton's arrest of you was an attempt to assert dominance when he felt his power was threatened." Tasha leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. "So, what's our next move?" Green handed her a file. "We're expanding the investigation. Your testimony is key. We also need you to work undercover to gather more evidence." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "Undercover? In my own case?" Green smiled. "Who better to expose the rot than someone who's already seen it up close?" Meanwhile, Brett found himself in a private meeting with Internal Affairs. The room was cold and the air heavy with unspoken tension. Across the table sat a panel of investigators, their eyes boring into him. "We've reviewed your case, Officer Hamilton," the lead investigator said. "The evidence against you is overwhelming, but we're willing to offer a deal." Brett's heart pounded. "What kind of deal?" "You cooperate fully with our investigation," the investigator continued. "Provide names, details, and anything else we need to dismantle this network. In return, we'll recommend a reduced sentence." Brett clenched his fists under the table. His options were bleak. Betray his colleagues or face the full weight of the law. "I'll think about it," he muttered. The investigator's gaze hardened. "You don't have much time to think, officer. The clock is ticking." Later that evening, Tasha found herself walking through the old neighborhood where it all began. The streets were quiet, but the weight of history lingered in the air. She thought about her father, a community leader who had fought tirelessly for justice. He'd always told her that change was a slow and painful process, but it was worth every struggle. As she turned a corner, she spotted a group of young kids playing basketball. One of them, a boy, no older than 12, stopped to wave at her. Tasha smiled and waved back, her heart swelling with both hope and determination. Her phone buzzed. It was Martin. "Tasha, we've got a lead on another officer tied to Hamilton. We need you to meet with our informant tonight." "Understood," she said, her resolve solidifying. This was more than a mission, it was personal. That night, in a dimly lit parking garage, Tasha met the informant. A nervous-looking man in his late 30s, He shifted from foot to foot, glancing around anxiously. "Agent Mills?" he asked. "That's me," Tasha said, showing her badge. "You have information." The man nodded, handing her a USB drive. "Everything's on here. Names, transactions, even recorded conversations. Hamilton isn't the only one involved." Tasha pocketed the drive, her mind racing. "Why are you humping us?" The man hesitated, his eyes filled with regret. "Because I've seen what happens when people like Hamilton go unchecked. It's time to set things right." Before Tasha could respond, the screech of tires echoed through the garage. A black SUV sped toward them, its headlights blinding. The informant's eyes widened in terror. "Get down!" Tasha shouted, pulling in behind a pillar as gunshots rang out. The SUV sped away, leaving behind a trail of shattered glass and spent casings. Tasha's heart pounded as she checked on the informant, who was shaking but unharmed. "We need to move," she said, helping him to his feet. They never talking. As they hurried toward her car, Tasha knew this was just the beginning. The network they were up against was powerful and ruthless, but she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The air in the FBI headquarters was thick with urgency the next morning. Tasha arrived early, clutching the USB drive tightly. She headed straight to the tech team's lab, where Agent Dave Wilkins, the resident cybersecurity expert, was already waiting. "Got your message," Dave said, taking the drive. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Tasha nodded, leaning against the desk as Dave plugged the drive into his secure terminal. Lines of code flashed across the screen and folders began to populate, labeled with names, dates, and incriminating evidence. "Wow," Dave muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "This is a goldmine. Bank transfers, recorded calls, even video footage. Whoever this guy is, he's been collecting receipts for years." Tasha's eyes narrowed. "Focus on the calls first. We need to know who Hamilton's been working with." Dave opened an audio file. The voices were grainy but clear. Voice 1. "We've got the neighborhood under control. They know better than to step out of line." Voice 2. "Good. Keep the pressure on. Any sign of the feds?" Voice 1. "Not yet, but we got people watching. If anyone talks, we'll handle it." Tasha clenched her jaw. The second voice was unmistakably Brett Hamilton. "Pause it," she said. "Rewind to that last part." Dave obliged, and Tasha listened again. "If anyone talks, we'll handle it." The implications were chilling. "They're silencing witnesses," Tasha said. "We need to act fast." Meanwhile, Brett Hamilton sat in his dingy apartment, the weight of the investigation pressing down on him. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet at the usual spot. Tonight, no excuses." Brett's pulse quickened. He knew the message was from one of his co-conspirators, likely someone higher up in their network. If he didn't show, they'd suspect he was turning against them. If he did, it could be his chance to gather intel for the FBI and possibly save himself. The clock was ticking. That evening, Tasha and her team gathered in the operations room. The informant's intel had revealed the location of an upcoming meeting between Hamilton and his associates, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city. "This is our best chance to take them down," Martin Green said, addressing the team. "But we need to be careful. These people are dangerous, and they won't go down without a fight." Tasha suited up, checking her gear. She knew the risks but felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The team deployed under the cover of darkness, their unmarked vehicles blending seamlessly into the night. As they approached the warehouse, Tasha's adrenaline spiked. They parked a safe distance away and moved in on foot, positioning themselves around the building. Through her earpiece, Tasha heard Dave's voice. "Thermal imaging shows 60 signatures inside. Looks like they're all armed." "Copy that," Martin replied. "Team, be ready. We move on my signal." Inside the warehouse, Brett paced nervously. 5 men sat around a table, their faces shadowed by dim overhead lighting. One of them, a burly man named Carter, stood and glared at Brett. "You've been quiet, Hamilton," Carter said. "Got something to share?" Brett forced a smirk, just waiting for the right moment. Carter's eyes narrowed. "You better not be getting soft. We got a lot riding on this operation." Before Brett could respond, a sudden crash echoed through the warehouse as the FBI team breached the doors. "FBI." Hands in the air. Tasha's voice rang out, authoritative and unyielding. Panic erupted. The men at the table scrambled, reaching for their weapons, but the FBI was faster. Tasha's team moved with precision, taking down the suspects one by one. Brett raised his hands, his face a mix of fear and resignation. "Don't shoot. I'm cooperating." Tasha aimed her weapon at him, her expression cold. On the ground, now. Rhett dropped to his knees, his hands behind his head. The other suspects were quickly subdued, and the warehouse fell silent except for the crackle of radios and the distant wail of sirens. Martin approached Tasha, nodding in approval. "Good work, everyone. We got them." As the suspects were let out in cuffs, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the tip of the iceberg. Hamilton's cooperation had brought them here, but she knew there were more players in this game, ones who wouldn't go down so easily. Back at headquarters, Rhett sat in an interrogation room, his face pale and his eyes hollow. Tasha entered, her presence commanding the room. "Well, Officer Hamilton," she said, placing a thick file on the table. "Looks like you've had quite the career. Care to explain how a decorated officer ends up running with criminals?" Rhett looked away, his voice barely a whisper. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Tasha leaned in, her gaze piercing. "But it is, and now you're going to tell us everything. Who's pulling the strings? How deep does this go?" Rhett hesitated, the weight of his choices crashing down on him. He knew there was no escape, no way to undo the damage he'd done. Finally, he spoke. "There's a man. We call him the broker. He's the one who coordinates everything. Bribes, intimidation, cover-ups. He's untouchable." Tasha had exchanged a glance with Martin, who had been listening from the observation room. They'd heard whispers of the broker before, but never had enough evidence to go after him. Until now. As Tasha left the room, her mind raced with possibilities. The operation had been a success, but the real battle was just beginning. The broker was their next target, and taking him down would require every ounce of skill, determination, and courage they had. But Tasha was ready. She had faced worse and come out stronger. This time would be no different. Or so she hoped. The FBI headquarters buzzed with anticipation. Tasha sat in the briefing room, reviewing every scrap of intel they had on the broker. His real identity was a mystery, but his operations left a trail of devastation. Communities torn apart, witnesses silenced, and corrupt officials placed in positions of power. Martin Green entered the room, holding a thick dossier. "All right, team," he said, setting it on the table. "Here's what we know about the broker. He's the puppet master behind Hamilton's network and several others across the state. He operates through layers of intermediaries, making it nearly impossible to trace anything back to him directly. Dave Wilkins joined them, his laptop open and streaming real-time data. I've been digging into financial records from the USB drive. The broker launders money through shell companies and offshore accounts. But here's the kicker. One of those companies just made a large purchase, a private jet. Destination, Mexico." Tasha frowned. "He's planning to flee." Martin nodded. "We have a narrow window to intercept him. If he gets out of the country, it'll be almost impossible to bring him to justice." The team quickly mobilized, preparing for a high-stakes operation. Every detail had to be perfect. Failure wasn't an option. Later that evening, Tasha stood on the tarmac of a private airfield. The air was cool, and the hum of jet engines echoed in the distance. She checked her gear, her heart steady, but her mind sharp. Beside her, Martin gave a final rundown. "The jet's scheduled to take off in less than an hour. We've confirmed the broker will be on board. Once he's in custody, we'll have enough leverage to dismantle his entire network." Tasha nodded, her determination unshakable. "Let's end this." Inside the airfield's hangar, the broker sat in a sleek black SUV, flanked by two heavily armed bodyguards. He was a man in his late 50s, with sharp features and an air of cold calculation. His phone buzzed with updates from his network, but he remained calm, confident that his escape was guaranteed. "Everything is set," one of the guards said. "We'll be airborne in 20 minutes. The broker smirked. "Good. By the time they realize I'm gone, I'll be untouchable." But his confidence was about to be shattered. The FBI moved in with precision. Tasha led a small team, using the cover of darkness to approach the hangar undetected. Through her earpiece, she heard Martin's voice. "Thermal imaging confirms 3 targets inside the SUV. Tasha, you're up." Tasha signaled to her team, and they moved into position. With a swift motion, they'd breached the hangar, floodlights illuminating the scene. "FBI, step out of the vehicle with your hands up." Tasha's voice echoed through the hangar. The broker's smirk vanished. He glanced at his guards, who immediately raised their weapons. But before they could react, the FBI team fired precise, non-lethal shots, disarming them and forcing them to the ground. The broker raised his hands slowly, stepping out of the SUV. Well," he said, his tone mocking. I suppose congratulations are in order. Tasha approached him, her gaze unyielding. You're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and multiple counts of obstruction of justice. The broker chuckled. Do you really think arresting me will change anything? My network runs deeper than you can imagine. Tasha leaned in, her voice low but firm. We'll see about that. Back at headquarters, the broker was placed in an interrogation room under heavy security. Tasha and Martin observed him through the one-way glass, strategizing their approach. He's cocky, Martin said. Thinks he's untouchable. Tasha nodded. But we've got the upper hand now. He doesn't know how much we've uncovered. She entered the interrogation room, sitting across from the broker. He greeted her with a smug smile. Agent Mills, he said smoothly, I've heard a lot about you. Not as much as we've heard about you, Tasha replied, sliding a folder across the table. This is just a fraction of the evidence we have. You're going away for a long time. The broker leaned back, feigning indifference. You can arrest me, but you can't stop the machine. Cut off one head, and another takes its place. Tasha's eyes narrowed. We'll dismantle every piece of your operation, starting with you. Unless you cooperate. The broker's smile faltered for the first time. What do you want? Names, locations, and every detail about your network, Tasha said. In exchange, we'll consider a plea deal. The broker hesitated, weighing his options. He knew the walls were closing in, but he wasn't ready to fold yet. I'll think about it, he said finally. Tasha stood, her expression cold. Take your time, but know this. Every second you stall, we're uncovering more. And when we're done, you won't have anything left to bargain with. She left the room, joining Martin in the observation area. He's cracking, she said. It's only a matter of time. Hours later, as Tasha prepared to leave for the night, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Dave. Agent Mills, we've intercepted a communication from the broker's network. They're planning something big, an attack to silence witnesses and destroy evidence. Tasha's heart raced. When and where? Tomorrow night, targeting one of our safe houses. Tasha immediately called Martin. We've got a new mission, she said. We need to protect those witnesses and stop this attack. Martin's voice was grim. Understood. Let's gear up. The stakes had just been raised. The broker's network was fighting back, and Tasha knew they were heading into their most dangerous operation yet. But she was ready to face it head-on. The next night, the tension was palpable as Tasha and her team prepared to defend the safe house. Hidden in a quiet suburb, the location was one of the FBI's most secure, housing key witnesses ready to testify against the broker's network. These testimonies could seal the case, but the looming threat was clear. If the broker's men succeeded, they'd lose everything. Tasha adjusted her earpiece, her voice steady, as she gave final instructions. No one enters this perimeter unless cleared. We have backup en route, but until they get here, we hold the line. Martin's voice crackled through the comms. Roger that. Thermal scans show movement a few blocks away. They're coming. Inside the safe house, 3 witnesses sat nervously, their eyes darting toward every creak and shadow. One of them, an older man named Mr. Jenkins, looked up as Tasha entered. Agent Mills, he said, his voice trembling. Is it true? Are they coming for us? Tasha knelt beside him, her expression firm but kind. We won't let them get to you. Stay calm, follow our instructions, and you'll be safe. He nodded, though the fear in his eyes didn't fade. Outside, the air was still, but the quiet was deceptive. Tasha's team had taken up positions around the house, eyes scanning the darkness. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance, followed by the low rumble of engines. 2 black SUVs pulled up at the end of the street, their occupants spilling out and moving with precision. Targets sighted, Martin reported. 6 armed individuals, moving in pairs. Tasha took a deep breath, her grip tightening on her weapon. Hold your positions. Wait for my signal. The attackers moved closer, their dark clothing blending into the night. As they approached the perimeter, one of them raised a hand, signaling the others to fan out. Through her scope, Tasha could see their faces, cold, focused, and determined. They weren't here to intimidate, they were here to kill. Engage, Tasha ordered. The night exploded with the sound of gunfire. Tasha's team fired with precision, forcing the attackers to take cover behind cars and fences. One went down almost immediately, while the others returned fire, trying to push forward. Keep them pinned, Tasha shouted, moving to a better vantage point. She spotted 2 attackers attempting to flank the house and took them down with swift, controlled shots. 3 down, Martin confirmed. 3 more still active. The remaining attackers, realizing they were outgunned, tried to retreat, But as they made their move, FBI backup arrived, cutting off their escape. Within minutes, the situation was under control. The attackers were disarmed and arrested, their mission a complete failure. Tasha lowered her weapon, her pulse still racing. "Status check," she called out. "All clear," Martin replied. "No injuries on our side." Tasha exhaled, relief washing over her. They had defended the safe house, and the witnesses were safe for now. Back at headquarters, the aftermath of the attack brought a new urgency. The captured attackers were interrogated, but they remained tight-lipped, refusing to give up any information on the broker. "He's not them loyal or terrified," Martin said, frustrated. "We're not getting anything from them." Tasha paced the room, her mind racing. "We don't need them to talk. We got their equipment, their communications. There's a trail, and we'll follow it." Dave was already working on it, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "I'm pulling data from their phones and radios now. If there's any link to the broker, we'll find it." Minutes later, Dave's eyes lit up. Got something. One of the phones had a location pinged just before the attack. A warehouse downtown, likely another safe house or operations center. Tasha leaned over his shoulder, studying the map. "That's our next target." The following night, the FBI prepared for another raid. This time, the stakes were even higher. The warehouse could hold crucial evidence or more members of the broker's network. Either way, they couldn't afford to miss. As they approached the location, Tasha's team moved with silent efficiency. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark, its exterior unassuming. But the intel suggested a hive of criminal activity within. "Thermal scan," Tasha whispered. Dave's voice came through her earpiece. 10 heat signatures, all armed. Tasha nodded. "We go in quiet. Take them down before they know what hit them." The team breached the warehouse, moving quickly through the shadows. They neutralized the first few guards silently, their movements precise and practiced. But as they reached the main floor, an alarm blared and chaos erupted. The suspects opened fire, and the warehouse became a battlefield. Tasha stayed focused, directing her team and picking off targets with deadly accuracy. Amid the chaos, she spotted a man trying to escape through a side door, carrying a briefcase. Tasha pursued him, her adrenaline spiking. The man was fast, but Tasha was faster. She tackled him just as he reached a waiting car, the briefcase skidding across the pavement. The man struggled, but Tasha quickly subdued him. "You're not going anywhere," she said, cuffing him. Back inside the warehouse, the FBI had secured the scene. The suspects were arrested, and the briefcase was brought in for analysis. Later, in the operations room, Tasha and Martin opened the briefcase. Inside were documents, hard drives, and a ledger. Dave immediately began analyzing the data. "This is it," Dave said, his excitement palpable. "This ledger contains detailed records of the broker's operations, payments, bribes, and even names of high-ranking officials on his payroll." Tasha smiled, a rare moment of satisfaction. "We got him." But just as she allowed herself to relax, Dave's face fell. "Wait, there's something else." He pulled up an encrypted file, his fingers working quickly to crack it. When the file opened, the room went silent. It was a detailed plan, targeting FBI agents, including Tasha. "They're planning to eliminate us," Dave said grimly. Tasha's jaw tightened. "Then we need to move faster. If the broker wants to play this game, we'll make sure he loses." The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. Tasha stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. The file laid out a chilling plan: surveillance on her and her team, timelines for targeted attacks, and contingency strategies. The broker wasn't just reacting. He was plotting a full-scale assault to dismantle the FBI's operation and eliminate the people spearheading it. Martin leaned over the table, his face grave. "This changes everything. We're not just chasing him anymore. He's coming for us." Tasha nodded, her mind already spinning through possibilities. "We need to hit him first. If he's accelerating his plans, we don't have time to sit back and wait." Dave, still glued to his laptop, spoke up. "There's more. Hidden in the file is a list of locations, safe houses, stash points, and one marked as HQ. It's heavily encrypted, but I'm working on decrypting the address." Tasha's eyes lit up. "HQ. That could be the broker's command center." "Exactly," Dave replied. "If we can find it, we might finally be able to cut off the head of the snake." Hours later, after an intense decryption process, Dave finally cracked the location. "Got it," he announced. "The HQ is in an upscale high-rise downtown, operating under the guise of a legitimate investment firm." Martin whistled. "Clever. Hiding in plain sight." Tasha reviewed the blueprints of the building. It's well fortified. If we're going in, we need to be smart about it. We can't afford to tip them off too early. Martin nodded. We'll need a multi-pronged approach: surveillance, infiltration, and tactical support. Tasha formulated a plan. We'll divide into 3 teams. Team Alpha will handle exterior surveillance, monitoring all entry and exit points. Team Bravo will manage internal infiltration. Dave, you'll hack their systems and disable security. Team Charlie will be the tactical unit, ready to storm the office once we've secured enough intel. Everyone nodded, understanding the gravity of the mission. That night, the operation was set in motion. Team Alpha positioned themselves in strategic locations around the high-rise, their eyes scanning for any suspicious activity. Team Bravo, disguised as maintenance workers, entered the building with forged IDs. Dave sat in a surveillance van nearby, his laptop humming as he bypassed the building's security systems. Inside the office on the 28th floor, the broker sat at a polished desk, reviewing reports. Around him, a small group of trusted operatives worked quietly. The atmosphere was tense, everyone on high alert after the recent FBI raids. Unbeknownst to them, Tasha and her team were already in the building. Dave's voice crackled through Tasha's earpiece. Security systems are down. You're clear to move. Tasha signaled to her team, and they advanced toward the target floor. They moved swiftly and silently, their weapons drawn, ready for anything. As they reached the 28th floor, Tasha's heart pounded. She knew this was their best chance to bring the broker down, but one wrong move could cost them everything. The team breached the office and chaos erupted. The broker's operatives scrambled for cover, drawing their weapons. Tasha and her team moved with precision, taking down the guards one by one. Amid the gunfire, the broker tried to escape through a hidden passage. Tasha spotted him and pursued, her focus unyielding. She followed him through a maze of corridors, her boots echoing against the tiled floors. "Give it up, broker," Tasha shouted. "You're not getting away." The broker didn't respond, pushing through a final door that led to the building's rooftop. The night air was sharp and cold as Tasha emerged, her weapon trained on him. "End of the line," she said, her voice steady. The broker raised his hand slowly, a smirk playing on his lips. "Agent Mills, you've been a thorn in my side for too long." Tasha stepped closer, her finger hovering over the trigger. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and murder." The broker chuckled. "Arrest me? Do you really think this ends with me in cuffs? My network will survive. Cut me down, and another will rise." Tasha didn't flinch. "We'll see about that." Before he could make another move, Martin and the rest of the team burst onto the rooftop, their weapons drawn. The broker's smirk faltered as he realized he was completely surrounded. "It's over," Martin said. "You've got nowhere to run." Reluctantly, the broker dropped to his knees, his hands behind his head. Tasha stepped forward, cuffing him. "Your empire is crumbling," she said, "and you're going to watch it all fall apart from behind bars." Back at headquarters, the broker sat in an interrogation room, his confidence visibly shaken. Tasha stood on the other side of the glass, watching him with a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Martin joined her. "We got him, but it's not over yet. He's still holding back key information." Tasha nodded. "He will talk." They always do. Just then, Dave burst into the room, holding a tablet. "You're going to want to see this." On the screen was a live feed of multiple raids happening across the city. Armed units were storming the remaining safe houses, seizing evidence, and arresting operatives. The network was unraveling in real time. "We're shutting them down, one piece at a time," Dave said with a grin. Tasha had allowed herself a small smile. They were finally turning the tide, but as she looked back at the broker, she knew he still had more secrets. Secrets that could either solidify their victory or lead to an even greater threat. For now, though, they had the upper hand, and she was determined to keep it. The interrogation room's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as the broker sat in silence, his fingers twitching against the cold metal table. His once cocky demeanor had cracked, but Tasha knew he wasn't done playing games. The man thrived on manipulation, and even cornered, he exuded a dangerous air of control. Tasha entered the room, her steps deliberate. She placed a thick file on the table and pulled out a chair across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She let the silence stretch, watching him squirm. "You've built quite the empire," Tasha said finally, her tone even. "But like all empires, it's crumbling. We've dismantled your operations, seized your assets, and arrested your top men. The game's over." The broker leaned back slightly, a shadow of his smirk returning. Is that what you think? Agent Mills, you're smart, but you're still playing catch-up. My empire, as you call it, isn't bound by geography or personnel. It's an idea, and ideas don't die. Tasha didn't flinch. She slid a photo across the table, a shot of his top lieutenants, handcuffed and being loaded into FBI vans. Your idea looks pretty powerless without these men. The broker's eyes flicked to the photo, but he said nothing. Tasha pressed on. You could either cooperate now and give us the full extent of your network, or we'll let the system bury you. Solitary confinement, 23 hours a day, no contact with the outside world. Every connection, every ounce of power you've clung to gone. For a moment, the broker's mask slipped. His jaw clenched and a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. But then he leaned forward, his voice low and calculated. Do you think I'd fear prison? I've prepared for this possibility for years. You may have won this battle, but you'll never uncover everything. There are players far beyond your reach. Tasha narrowed her eyes. Then enlighten me. Who are these players? The broker chuckled softly. Even if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. You're in over your head. Before Tasha could respond, Martin's voice came through her earpiece. Tasha, step out for a moment. We've had something. She shot the broker a cold glance. Don't get too comfortable. In the operations room, David Martin stood over a large monitor displaying a live feed from a warehouse. The scene was chaotic. Agents were swarming the building, seizing documents and equipment. We found this location thanks to the intel from the raid, Martin explained. It's another one of the broker's major hubs, but that's not the most interesting part. Dave zoomed in on a specific section of the screen. Check this out. Tasha leaned closer. The camera focused on a wall, covered in photographs and notes, all connected by strings. At the center of the web was a single name, Elias Whitmore. Tasha's brow furrowed. Who's Whitmore? Martin crossed his arms. A name that's popped up in some of our investigations, but nothing concrete until now. He's a high-profile billionaire with deep political ties. If the broker is connected to him, we're dealing with a conspiracy far larger than we thought. Dave chimed in. Whitmore's been linked to offshore accounts, shady business deals, and even campaign finance scandals. But he's never been directly implicated in anything. This could be the break we need. Tasha nodded, her mind racing. We need to dig into Whitmore. If he's pulling strings behind the scenes, we'll expose him. Martin agreed. Let's start with his financials and associates. We'll need warrants and a solid strategy. Whitmore's not the kind of guy who goes down easily. Back in the interrogation room, Tasha returned with renewed determination. She placed another file on the table, this one thinner but no less significant. Elias Whitmore, she said, watching the broker's reaction carefully. For the first time, his composure faltered. His eyes widened slightly, and his lips pressed into a thin line. We got enough to start connecting the dots, Tasha continued. It's only a matter of time before we have everything we need to bring him down. But you can make it easier for yourself. The broker's silence spoke volumes. Tasha leaned in, her voice firm. Help us build the case against Whitmore, and maybe you won't spend the rest of your life in a concrete box. The room was heavy with tension. Finally, the broker exhaled, his shoulders slumping slightly. You're playing a dangerous game, Agent Mills. Whitmore isn't just another criminal. He's a kingmaker. If you go after him, you'll be painting a target on your back. Tasha's gaze didn't waver. I faced worse. The broker shook his head, a hint of respect in his eyes. You're relentless. I'll give you that. Fine, I'll talk. But you'd better be ready for the storm that's coming. The next few days were a whirlwind. Armed with the broker's cooperation, the FBI launched a full-scale investigation into Elias Whitmore. They combed through financial records, intercepted communications, and tracked down key associates. As the pieces came together, a chilling picture emerged. Whitmore wasn't just funding the broker's operations. He was orchestrating a network of corruption that spanned multiple industries and government agencies. His influence was vast, his reach seemingly endless. But Tasha and her team were relentless. They worked around the clock, building an airtight case. One evening, as Tasha sat in her office reviewing the latest evidence, her phone buzzed. It was Dave. You need to see this, he said, his voice tense. Tasha hurried to the operations room, where Dave pulled up a video feed. It showed Whitmore at a lavish event, surrounded by high-profile figures. But what caught Tasha's attention was a brief interaction. Whitmore exchanging a discreet envelope with a well-known senator. Dave zoomed in on the footage. This could be the smoking gun. If we can trace what's in that envelope, we'll have undeniable proof of his influence. Tasha's eyes narrowed. Then, let's get to work. As she left the room, her resolve hardened. The fight against the broker had been intense, but this was on another level. Taking down someone as powerful as Whitmore would be the ultimate test of their skills, courage, and endurance. And Tasha was ready for the challenge. The pressure was mounting. Elias Whitmore's name was splashed across confidential files, phone intercepts, and financial transactions. Each new piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of his empire, an intricate web of bribery, manipulation, and power. But Whitmore himself remained untouchable, a ghost who moved with calculated precision, always one step ahead. Tasha stood in the center of the operations room, surrounded by her team. The atmosphere was tense but focused. Everyone knew what was at stake. "Here's where we stand," Tasha began, her voice commanding. Whitmore's public persona is squeaky clean. His private dealings, however, are another story. We traced millions of dollars funneled through shell companies, many tied to political campaigns and government contracts. Martin stepped forward, arms crossed. The problem is, none of it points directly to Whitmore. He's insulated himself with layers of intermediaries. Tasha nodded. That's why we need a direct link, something undeniable that ties him to these operations. Dave, seated at his workstation, chimed in. I've been analyzing the footage from that gala. The envelope Whitmore handed off to the senator is key. If we can figure out what was in it, we'll have leverage. Any luck tracing the envelope? Tasha asked. Working on it, Dave replied, but there's something else. I cross-referenced Whitmore's travel records with financial data. He made an unregistered trip to the Cayman Islands 3 weeks ago. Around the same time, a new offshore account was opened under a different alias. Tasha's eyes narrowed. What's the connection? Dave pulled up a series of transactions. This account has been transferring funds to several known operatives in the broker's network, including payments for, let's call them favors. It's a smoking gun, but we need more to make it stick. Meanwhile, Elias Whitmore sat in his penthouse office, overlooking the city skyline. He sipped a glass of scotch, his demeanor calm but his mind sharp. His personal assistant, a polished man in his early 30s, stood by the desk. They're closing in, Whitmore said, his voice smooth yet cold. The FBI is more persistent than I anticipated. The assistant adjusted his glasses. Shall I initiate contingency measures? Whitmore gave a faint smile. Not yet. Let them think they're gaining ground. When the time comes, we'll remind them who holds the real power. Back at headquarters, Tasha's team was making progress. They secured a warrant to investigate the offshore account further and were closing in on several of Whitmore's key associates. But as they prepared for the next phase, a sudden development threw them off course. An urgent alert flashed across Dave's screen. Tasha, you need to see this, he said, his tone urgent. Tasha rushed over. What's going on? Dave pointed to the monitor. One of our witnesses, Mr. Jenkins, has gone missing. He was supposed to be under protection, but he never showed up at his safe house. Tasha's stomach dropped. When was he last seen? 2 hours ago, Dave replied. His protection detail reported that he left to meet someone claiming to be from the FBI. It was a trap. Martin clenched his fists. Whitmore's people must have taken him. Tasha's mind raced. Jenkins was a key witness, one of the few who could directly testify against Whitmore's network. If they lost him, their case would take a significant hit. Trace his phone, Tasha ordered. We need to find him before it's too late. The trace led them to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. The area was quiet, eerily so, as Tasha and her team moved in. The dim light of their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the rusted machinery and crumbling walls. Stay sharp, Tasha whispered, her weapon drawn. They navigated through the maze of corridors, the sound of their footsteps echoing softly. Suddenly, a faint noise caught Tasha's attention, a muffled voice, coming from one of the rooms ahead. She signaled to the team, and they approached cautiously. Tasha kicked open the door, revealing Jenkins tied to a chair, his face bruised but alive. Standing beside him was a man in a suit, holding a gun to Jenkins' head. Drop your weapon, Tasha commanded, her voice firm. The man smirked. You're too late, Agent Mills. This man isn't going to testify against anyone. Before he could pull the trigger, a shot rang out. Tasha's bullet hit him square in the shoulder, causing him to drop the gun. Jenkins slumped forward, trembling but unharmed. Secure him, Tasha ordered as her team rushed in to apprehend the assailant. Back at headquarters, Jenkins was shaken but determined. They tried to break me, he told Tasha. Said no one would believe me if I testified. But I'm not backing down. Tasha placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're doing the right thing. We'll make sure you're safe." With Jenkins back in custody and more evidence piling up, Tasha knew they were inching closer to bringing Whitmore down. But the stakes were higher than ever. Whitmore was a master of the long game, and Tasha could feel the weight of his next move looming over them. As she prepared for the next phase, her phone buzzed with a message from Dave. "We found something big. Meet me in the operations room." Tasha's heart quickened. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the battle was far from over. Whitmore's empire was about to face its greatest threat yet. Tasha strode into the operations room, the urgency in Dave's message still fresh in her mind. The team was gathered around a large monitor, where Dave was pulling up a series of encrypted files he had just cracked. "All right," Dave said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. These files came from one of Whitmore's offshore accounts. They're detailed records of high-level transactions, political payoffs, and something else. Plans for a covered operation set to go down within the next 48 hours. Tasha's brows furrowed. Covered operation? What kind of operation? Dave clicked on a file labeled Project Nightfall. The screen filled with schematics, timelines, and a list of targets. "It's an assassination plot," he said grimly. "They're targeting 3 high-profile individuals, a federal judge, a journalist, and a senator. All 3 have been outspoken against corruption." Martin leaned in, his face tense. "Whitmore's cleaning house. If he takes them out, it'll send a clear message to anyone who dares to stand against him." Tasha's mind raced. When and where? Dave pointed to a map that appeared on the screen. The hits are scheduled to happen at different locations across the city, all within a tight window. First target, Judge Alan Mercer. He's presiding over a major corruption case tied to Whitmore's network. His location is the courthouse downtown. Tasha wasted no time. "We need to split up. Martin, take Bravo team and secure the judge. I'll lead Alpha team to the journalist's location. Dave, keep tracking the senator's movements and alert us the moment you have a location." Martin nodded. "Let's move." The team mobilized quickly, their vehicles cutting through the city streets with lights flashing but no sirens. Tasha's heart pounded as she reviewed the journalist's profile. Rachel Vaughn, an investigative reporter who had been publishing a series of exposes on Whitmore's dealings. According to Dave's intel, Rachel was currently at a local TV station preparing for a live broadcast. She was unaware of the imminent danger. Tasha and her team arrived at the station just as Rachel was wrapping up her segment. Tasha stormed in, flashing her badge. "Rachel Vaughn, FBI. We need to get you out of here now." Rachel blinked in confusion. "What's going on?" "There's it on you," Tasha said bluntly. "We have reason to believe Whitmore's men are already on their way." Rachel's face paled, but she quickly gathered her things. "Let's go." Just as they exited the building, Tasha's instincts kicked in. She spotted a black SUV idling across the street, its windows tinted. The moment the group emerged, the SUV roared to life, speeding toward them. "Get down!" Tasha shouted, pushing Rachel behind a car as the SUV's side window rolled down, revealing a gunman. Shots rang out, shattering glass and sending bystanders scrambling. Tasha returned fire, her team quickly flanking the vehicle. One of her agents managed to shoot out a tire, causing the SUV to swerve and crash into a lamppost. The gunman stumbled out, firing wildly before Tasha's team subdued him. With the immediate threat neutralized, Tasha turned to Rachel. "Are you okay?" Rachel nodded, shaken but unhurt. "Thanks to you." "We're not out of the woods yet," Tasha said, helping her to her feet. "We need to get you to a secure location." Meanwhile, Martin and Bravo team reached the courthouse just in time. Judge Mercer was in his chambers, preparing for a late session. When Martin explained the situation, Mercer's usually stoic face betrayed a flicker of fear. "Do what you need to do, Agent Green," Mercer said. "I've faced threats before, but this sounds different." Martin nodded. "We'll keep you safe, Judge, but we need to move quickly." As they escorted Mercer out through a secure back exit, another black SUV screeched into the alleyway. The assailants didn't waste time, opening fire as soon as they spotted the group. Bravo team engaged immediately, their training kicking in. Martin shielded Mercer, firing back with precision. The firefight was intense but brief, ending when Bravo team neutralized the attackers. "Judge Mercer is secure," Martin reported through the comms. "Target neutralized." Back at the operations room, Dave finally pinpointed the senator's location. "Senator Hawkins is at a charity gala," he informed Tasha and Martin. "It's a high-profile event, which makes it harder to secure, but also harder for the attackers to act without drawing attention. Tasha wasted no time. "Martin, regroup with me at the gala. We'll take this one together." The gala was a glittering event, with politicians, celebrities, and wealthy donors mingling under the grand chandeliers of a luxury hotel ballroom. Tasha and Martin entered in formal wear, their earpieces discreetly hidden. They quickly identified Senator Hawkins, who was chatting with a group of attendees near the stage. Tasha approached him, her demeanor calm but urgent. "Senator Hawkins, we're with the FBI. We need to speak with you privately." The senator looked surprised, but followed them to a quiet corner. "What's this about?" "There's an immediate threat on your life," Tasha said. "We believe Whitmore's men are planning to strike tonight." Hawkins' face tightened. "That man will stop at nothing." Before Tasha could respond, her earpiece crackled. "Heads up," Dave said. "I've got eyes on two individuals acting suspiciously near the main entrance. They match the profiles of known hitmen." Tasha and Martin exchanged a glance. "We're on it," Martin said. The agents split up, blending into the crowd as they closed in on the suspects. Tasha approached one of them, a man in a sharp suit pretending to be a waiter. When he reached into his jacket, she moved. "FBI, hands where I can see them," she commanded. The man spun, pulling out a weapon, but Tasha was faster. She disarmed him with a swift move and pinned him to the ground. Across the room, Martin subdued the second suspect just as he attempted to draw a concealed pistol. The gala descended into chaos as guests fled, but the threat was neutralized. Senator Hawkins was unharmed, thanks to the swift action of Tasha and her team. Later that night, back at headquarters, the mood was a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. They had thwarted Whitmore's operation, saving 3 lives and capturing key operatives. But Tasha knew this wasn't the end. Whitmore was still out there, and as long as he remained free, the danger persisted. Martin approached her, a cup of coffee in hand. "We did good tonight." Tasha had accepted the coffee, her eyes reflecting a mix of determination and fatigue. "Yeah, but Whitmore's still out there, pulling strings." Martin nodded. "Then we keep pushing. He's running out of moves, and when he slips, we'll be there to catch him." Tasha took a sip, her resolve solid. The fight wasn't over, but they were closing in. And this time, Whitmore wouldn't escape. The city was quieter now, but the tension was palpable. Elias Whitmore had retreated into the shadows, but his influence was still tangible. For every operative arrested, 2 more seemed ready to step in. And while his assassination plot had failed, Tasha knew it wouldn't be his last move. Sitting in the dimly lit briefing room, she and her team reviewed their next steps. The captured hitmen were refusing to talk, but they'd recovered encrypted communications that pointed to a larger operation. Dave was working around the clock to crack them. "We're close," Martin said, breaking the silence. "Whitmore's scrambling, and desperate men make mistakes." Tasha nodded. "That's what we're counting on. He knows we're closing in, and he'll try to cover his tracks. But this time, we'll be ready." Dave entered the room, a flash drive in hand. "I've decrypted part of the new files," he announced. "It's big." He plugged the drive into the monitor, and a series of documents appeared on screen. Among them were plans for an international smuggling ring, leveraging Whitmore's shell companies to move weapons and launder money through multiple countries. Tasha's eyes scanned the documents. This isn't just about him staying in power. He's funding something bigger. Dave nodded. "Exactly. These operations are tied to destabilizing regions overseas, creating chaos that Whitmore profits from." Martin's jaw tightened. This goes beyond corruption. He's fueling conflicts for his own gain. Dave clicked on another document. "And here's the kicker. There's a shipment scheduled to leave the city tomorrow night. It's heavily guarded, and from what I can tell, it's carrying both weapons and sensitive documents, likely containing names of more players in his network." Tasha stood. "We can't let that shipment leave. If we intercept it, we'll have everything we need to dismantle his operation." Martin nodded. "We'll need a tactical strike. This won't be easy." The next night, the team geared up for their most critical mission yet. The shipment was being loaded onto a private cargo plane at a remote airfield on the outskirts of the city. The location was heavily guarded, with armed men patrolling the perimeter and security vehicles stationed strategically. Tasha and Martin led the team, their faces grim with focus. The plan was simple but risky: infiltrate, secure the shipment, and capture any high-level operatives on site. As they approached the airfield, Tasha's earpiece crackled. "Alpha team in position," she said softly. "Bravo team, report." "Bravo team in position," came Martin's reply. "All units ready." Dave's voice followed. Thermal imaging confirms 15 hostiles, heavily armed. They're expecting trouble. Tasha smirked slightly. Good, let's not disappoint them. With a signal, the operation began. Bravo team breached the perimeter, taking out the guards with swift, silent precision. Alpha team moved toward the cargo plane, where the shipment was being loaded. The air was tense, every step calculated. Suddenly, an alarm blared. The guards scrambled, raising their weapons as they shouted orders. The quiet of the night erupted into chaos. Engage, Tasha commanded, her voice cutting through the commotion. Gunfire erupted, the team moving with practiced coordination. Tasha ducked behind a stack of crates, returning fire as she advanced toward the plane. One by one, the guards fell, but the resistance was fierce. Into the plane, Martin's team secured the shipment. "We've got the cargo," he reported, "securing the documents now." As Tasha pushed forward, her eyes locked onto a familiar figure, Whitmore's right-hand man, Vincent Kane. He was trying to flee, a briefcase in hand. "Martin, I've got eyes on Kane," Tasha called out, breaking into a sprint. Kane spotted her and bolted toward a waiting SUV. Tasha pursued him, her adrenaline surging. As he reached the vehicle, she fired a warning shot, forcing him to stop. "Drop the briefcase," she shouted, her weapon trained on him. Kane hesitated, his eyes darting between Tasha and the vehicle. Then, with a resigned scowl, he set the briefcase on the ground and raised his hands. "You're making a mistake," he sneered. "You'll never stop Whitmore." Tasha cuffed him, her expression cold. "We'll see about that." Back at headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. The intercepted shipment contained not only weapons, but also a treasure trove of documents, names, transactions, and detailed plans linking Whitmore to his international network. Martin placed the briefcase on the table, opening it to reveal stacks of confidential files. "This is it," he said. "Everything we need to bring Whitmore down." Tasha nodded, her gaze steady. It's time to move. The following morning, arrest warrants were issued for several high-ranking officials and business leaders tied to Whitmore's network. The FBI conducted simultaneous raids across the city, seizing assets and shutting down operations. Whitmore, however, remained elusive. But Tasha knew his time was running out. As she prepared for what she knew would be the final confrontation, a message came through from an informant. "Whitmore is trying to flee. They'll be at the docks tonight." Tasha's heart pounded. This was it, the moment they had been building toward. "Team, gear up," she said, her voice firm. "We're ending this tonight." The docks were shrouded in darkness, the faint hum of machinery and the lapping waves providing the only sound. Massive cargo ships loomed in the distance, their towering silhouettes barely visible against the night sky. Tasha and her team moved with calculated precision, their eyes scanning every shadow and corner. This was where Elias Whitmore would make his final stand or fall. Tasha's earpiece crackled to life. Thermal imaging confirms multiple hostiles, Dave reported from the surveillance van. They're spread out across the area, but Whitmore is on the east side, near a private yacht. He's got at least 6 guards with him. "Understood," Tasha replied. "Bravo team, secure the perimeter. Alpha team, with me." Martin's voice followed. "Copy that. Bravo team moving to intercept." Tasha's heart pounded with anticipation. This was the culmination of months of work, countless hours of digging and near misses. Whitmore had evaded justice for too long, but tonight, that was going to change. Near the yacht, Whitmore stood on the deck, his sharp suit pristine despite the chaos surrounding him. His right-hand man, Vincent Kane, had been captured, and most of his network was in shambles. Yet he remained composed, his icy demeanor unwavering. A guard approached. "Sir, everything's ready. We can leave as soon as you give the word." Whitmore nodded, gazing out at the dark waters. "Good. The FBI thinks they've won, but they've only scratched the surface. By the time they realize what's happening, I'll be rebuilding elsewhere." He turned to head inside the yacht when the faint sound of footsteps caught his attention. Tasha and Alpha team moved swiftly but silently, their weapons at the ready. They approached the yacht, taking cover behind crates and barrels. Tasha signaled for her team to hold position as she advanced alone, her eyes locked on Whitmore. "Elias Whitmore," she called out, her voice cutting through the night. Whitmore turned slowly, his face betraying no emotion. "Agent Mills, I must admit, your persistence is impressive." Tasha stepped closer, her weapon aimed steadily at him. "It's over. Your empire is crumbling, and there's nowhere left to run." Whitmore chuckled softly. "Do you really think capturing me will change anything? My influence reaches farther than you can imagine. You're just a cog in a machine too vast for your understanding. Tasha's expression hardened. Maybe. But tonight, the machine loses a key piece. Whitmore gave a subtle nod, and suddenly, his guards emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn. Tasha's team reacted instantly, engaging in a fierce firefight. "Stay down," Tasha shouted, taking cover behind a metal container. Bullets ricocheted off the steel, sparks flying. She returned fire, her shots precise, taking down 2 of Whitmore's guards. Martin's voice came through her earpiece. "Bravo, team here. We've secured the perimeter and neutralized reinforcements. Moving to your position." Tasha focused on Whitmore, who was making his way toward the yacht's cabin. "Martin, Whitmore's trying to escape. I'm going after him." "Copy that," Martin replied. "We've got your back." Tasha pursued Whitmore through the yacht's narrow corridors. He moved quickly, but Tasha was relentless. As she closed in, Whitmore pulled a hidden gun from his jacket and fired a shot, narrowly missing her. "You're only delaying the inevitable, Whitmore," Tasha shouted. He didn't respond, pushing through a door that led to the upper deck. Tasha followed, her weapon raised. The night air was sharp and cold as they faced off, the city lights flickering in the distance. Whitmore raised his gun again, but Tasha was faster. She fired, hitting his shoulder. He stumbled, the weapon slipping from his hand as he clutched the wound. "It's over," Tasha said, advancing slowly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Whitmore sank to his knees, his cold gaze fixed on Tasha. "You may have won this battle, Agent Mills, but the war is far from over. Others will rise to take my place." Tasha approached, her cuffs in hand. "Let them. I'll be ready." She secured the cuffs around his wrists just as Martin and the rest of the team arrived on the deck. "Whitmore is in custody," Tasha reported, mission accomplished. Back at headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. The successful capture of Elias Whitmore sent shockwaves through the Bureau and the media. His arrest marked a turning point, not just for the case, but for the countless lives affected by his corruption. Tasha sat in the debriefing room, reflecting on the journey. Martin entered, a satisfied smile on his face. "You did it," he said, handing her a coffee. "Whitmore's going away for a long time." Tasha took the cup, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We did it. This was a team effort." Martin nodded. "And the fallout from his arrest is already starting. Politicians, business leaders, everyone tied to him is scrambling." Tasha leaned back in her chair. "Good. It's about time the system worked for the people it's supposed to protect." As the team celebrated their victory, Tasha couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Whitmore's empire had fallen and justice had prevailed. But she knew the fight against corruption and abuse of power was ongoing. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing they had made a difference. The aftermath of Elias Whitmore's arrest sent ripples across the country. The once untouchable billionaire was now in a high-security prison, awaiting trial for an avalanche of charges: conspiracy, corruption, money laundering, and orchestrating assassination plots. The evidence collected by Tasha and her team was ironclad, ensuring there would be no escape this time. In court, Whitmore's usual composure was replaced with a cold, silent stare as witness after witness testified against him. Among them was Judge Mercer, whose courage to stand firm despite the threats underscored the importance of justice. Rachel Vaughn's testimony was equally compelling, detailing Whitmore's extensive influence over the media and public perception. Senator Hawkins publicly praised the FBI, emphasizing the significance of their work in dismantling Whitmore's corrupt network. The trial was a spectacle, drawing national attention. After weeks of testimony and overwhelming evidence, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering their verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Whitmore to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, citing the irreparable harm he had caused to countless lives. Whitmore's fall from grace was complete. His assets were seized, his companies dismantled, and his name became synonymous with greed and corruption. The hero's rewards. For Tasha Mills, the victory was deeply personal. She had spent months tirelessly chasing down leads, facing danger head-on, and standing firm in the face of adversity. Her exceptional leadership and dedication didn't go unnoticed. At a ceremony held in FBI headquarters, she was awarded the Director's Medal of Excellence, one of the highest honors in federal law enforcement. As she stood at the podium, accepting the medal, Tasha looked out at her team, Martin, Dave, and the others who had been with her every step of the way. "This isn't just my victory," she said, her voice steady. "It's ours. We stood against corruption, against those who thought they were above the law, and we won. But the fight doesn't end here. We'll continue to serve, to protect, and to ensure justice prevails." The room erupted in applause, her words resonating with every agent present. Martin, her steadfast partner, was promoted to Deputy Director of Field Operations. His tactical expertise and unwavering support during the mission had proven invaluable. At the ceremony, he gave Tasha a sleek grin. "Guess I'll be keeping an even closer eye on you now." Dave, whose tech skills had cracked the case wide open, received a commendation for his pivotal role in the operation. He was also offered a leadership position in the FBI's cyber division, a testament to his expertise and commitment. Rachel Vaughn, the journalist whose bravery in exposing Whitmore's dealings brought the truth to light, was honored with the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism. Her series of exposes became a rallying cry for accountability and transparency in government and business. Judge Mercer and Senator Hawkins continued their work, bolstered by the public's renewed faith in the justice system. Both became prominent advocates for anti-corruption reforms, ensuring that the cracks Whitmore had exploited would be sealed for future generations. Justice served for the villains. Whitmore's right-hand man, Vincent Kane, who had attempted to flee with sensitive documents, was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison after cooperating with the investigation. His testimony, while self-serving, helped solidify the case against Whitmore and other key players. The captured operatives and corrupt officials tied to Whitmore's network faced their own trials. Many received lengthy prison sentences, their careers and reputations destroyed. The shadowy figures who had once thrived under Whitmore's protection were now exposed and held accountable for their crimes. Moving forward, with Whitmore's empire dismantled, Tasha took a rare moment to reflect on her journey. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but it was worth every step. She had proven, not only to herself but to the world, that justice could prevail even against the most powerful adversaries. One evening, as Tasha sat on her balcony overlooking the city, Martin joined her with 2 cups of coffee. They shared a quiet moment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "You ever think about what's next?" Martin asked. Tasha smiled, a hint of weariness in her eyes. "Always. There's always another case, another fight. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy this victory." Martin raised his cup, to justice, and to the team that made it happen. Tasha clinked her cup against his, to the team. As they sat in companionable silence, the weight of their mission lifted, replaced by a quiet sense of fulfillment. The city for now was a little safer, and Tasha knew that as long as there were people like her and her team, justice would always have its champions.